Hey friends, it's Kevin from There's No Business Like. We are only 5 days away from the Midwest Arts Expo. We are 5 days from professional development, exploring the expo hall, showcases, and the hang. But who says you were listening to this on the first day it came out? Oh, maybe you are on your way to Max right now. If so, don't forget to stop by booth 512 to see us. Or are you listening to this after Max? How did it go? Did you come see any of the panels we were on? How do we do? If we were amazing, you should let us know. No matter when you are listening to this, we hope to see you at the Midwest Arts Expo, booth 512.
Hello and welcome to There's No Business Like, a podcast where friends and industry colleagues explore topics and interview leaders in our industry of professional theatrical touring.
Welcome back to There's No Business Like. It's good to see you again. I am here with all of my friends.
These are all the friends you have.
The only ones. So
These are the only friends Josh has, period.
good to be here with all of my friends, starting with Danielle.
Oh, hey, it's Danielle Van Hook from the Alden in McLean, Virginia.
Brian.
Brian Zelmer from KU Presents.
Katie.
Hi, everyone. Katie Miller with Michigan Maven Creative Associates.
And Kevin.
Kevin Maynard, Quad City Arts, splitting the border between Iowa and Illinois.
So in honor of this being our 100th episode, the question today is, what is your favorite thing in quantities of 100?
Chocolate,
$100 bills.
Donuts.
dogs.
That is way too many dogs, Danielle. way too many
way
dogs.
too many.
What if they're all small?
Still too many. That might be worse.
I say 100 singers in a chorus.
That's actually pretty good. I mean, it depends on the singers, though.
But with 100, you could have one or two bad ones and they'll just be drowned out.
Not what my high school choir teacher said.
Danielle, you just lip the words. Like, you don't need to actually say
Yeah,
it out
I
loud.
do kind of remember that, like, as we were rehearsing, it was like, if you don't really know it, then just move your mouth. And I was like, oh, I know it.
Do you?
Do you
really?
Well, I'll go sappy now. Say 100 arts administrators gathered together talking about the issues of the day and creating community together.
All right. I think we've had enough of this one.
Well, for me, it's 100 episodes of There's No Business Like podcast. And in honor of our 100th episode, we've got a conversation today with Peter Noone. Enjoy.
Hello, I'm Peter Noone, Herman from Herman's Hermits. Good morning, good day.
Hi, Peter. Thank you for joining us today.
It's nice to be here, thank you.
Let's just get started with, how did you get into the arts and into acting and singing? Because you started on TV before you started your music career. How did you get in that to begin with?
I came from a musical family, an amateur musical family. There was always music. If there was a funeral or a christening or a wedding, those things where any family gathering, like my dad had a trombone, his brother had a trumpet, my grandfather was the church organist, my grandmother was the choir mistress, my Auntie Mary was a bit of a Fats Waller kind of piano player. So there was lots of music often in a thing called the parlor. As I was a dilettante in the musical instrument department, I became the lead singer. And my job was to remember all the words to all the songs, old Irish songs, old English songs, Any Old Iron, I'm Henry VIII, I Am, there's Future Mrs. Hawkins, lots and lots of different kinds of music. When I was about 7, my sister got a record player and she played the music that girls played. She was a couple of years older than me and they were all romantic things. And I would be in my bedroom next to hers. And through the wall, I grew up with all those romantic pop records. You know, it went from Roy Orbison over the life. It went through the Everly Brothers, Roy Orbison. And I found my inspiration. I got a record player and I started to collect records. I was inspired by Buddy Holly and the Crickets and all those people. And that was it, really. I was a record collector. At school, they would have, my school had, school events. And I was in my grandmother's choir. But my grandmother had told me that I had to stand at the back because I sang too loud. And I never got chose for the leads in any of the school things. You know, they do the Mikado, Gilbert and Sullivan, and that kind of stuff. And I never got chosen for one of the lead parts. I always got chosen as a background singer, basically because I was screwing around a lot. You know, I wasn't really that into any other music except for my own kind of music. And somebody, at some point in there when I was 11 or 12, somebody decided that I was way too smart for the music teachers at my school. My mother and father enrolled me in a thing called the Manchester School of Music, which taught music and drama and elocution. Part of English society at the time, this is pre-Beatles. If you didn't speak Oxford English, you were thought to be like working class yobbos, basically. It was like almost like a race thing, you know, like people from the north of England couldn't get jobs as good as the people who, oh, thank you very much. Those people got all the oldie ton. And so my parents thought elocution learning how to speak properly would get me moved to the next level of whatever professional career I was in. Because to be honest, we all talked a bit like that, you know, we were all a bit... so I remember that I went to this Manchester School of Music and the drama class taught me, you know, my father's car is a Jaguar and Papa drives rather fast through castles, barns and drafty farms. Arthur drives far. Arthur's cart is far Arthur's cart is far less smart and can't drive half as fast. But I'd rather drive in Arthur's cart than my papa's fast car. It was one of those things. And you learn how to say fast instead of fast and awkward instead of awkward. And bit by bit, I was like, so this little school was like a bus ride from my school, from my real school. And I'd go to evenings and it became like a night class. And I kind of enjoyed it, but I noticed when I was in there, first of all, they sent me on auditions because a television thing had opened. And my mother loved that. My mother was a real, what you call like a showbiz mommy. They'd take me to auditions. You know, I remember I went to Harrogate and did a poetry reading competition and I came second. And my mother thought that was the greatest thing that had ever happened in the family, that my son has got the second prize in Harrogate, telling all her friends and everything. But anyway, I did auditions and eventually I got a few jobs on television, you know, and one of them was, and they paid money. And I got a thing called a union card. I became a member of the Actors Equity Union, which was a bit of a prize because you couldn't get in the union without a job and you couldn't get a job without being in the union, which is a very common thing. I started to do these little television things, but my head was always... My record collection was my most important possession, and I spent more time with that than is normal, I think. In another room at the School of Music, you could see people having a lot more fun than the actors and actresses. I noticed these other boys in a room were having a load of fun. And one day I walked in, I said, and they were all much older than me. What's that all about? I can see you're all having so much fun. It's not... And they were playing Chuck Berry songs. Popular music, a bit past the period, but you know, I said, show me, and they had a guitar and they showed me, they said, look, if you can bar this chord, you can play all of Chuck Berry songs and all of Buddy Holly's songs. If you can play A, D, and E, you've got all Buddy. So that was it. I thought, whoa, how do I get in this class? Well, you can't be in this class because this is what we do for fun. We're like a band. Oh. So I didn't think much about that, but I started to go out and watch live music because the British government had created a thing called youth clubs because most people in the north of England, their mums and dads worked, both members. So boys and girls like my sister and I finished school at 4:00. We were home at 4:30 and then we had nothing to do until our parents showed up from home. And my parents often didn't. My parents worked late and they were very, very committed workers. This youth club thing came, and I wandered over to one of these youth clubs. I guess I was 13 or 14, 13 maybe. There was a band on stage and I was kind of semi-famous. I wasn't the kind of famous that got you girls because I was a bit of an odd character. You know, I dressed differently than everybody else, you know. So I went over there basically like everybody else of my age just to look at girls. and think about what might happen if I ever got hold of them. I'm standing on the side of the room where the boys stood, looking at the girls that and the girls looking at us with disdain. This guy came over to me, and his name was Alan Wrigley, and he said, "Hey, you're Peter Noone," because anybody who'd seen me on Coronation Street or one of those shows knew that I was like a local boy and I'd been an actor. And I said, yeah. And I thought he was going to beat me up. I actually was afraid of him. And he said, "Look, our singer, Malcolm Lightfoot, hasn't showed up. He's let us down, And it's now 4:30 and school's been over half an hour and he isn't here yet. Do you know any of these songs?" He knew that I had a fascinating record collection. It was just like a look, Peter Noone's got all these records. And I said, I'll Never Dance Again by Bobby Rydell. And I did know it because my sister had the record. Every song he listed, which was on a thing called a set list, although I had no idea what that meant, I knew the songs. So I said, "Could you help us out and sing with us tonight?" I go, "Oh my, and I was kind of cornered into it. I said, "Okay." And I got up on stage and I remember I hid behind the microphone stand, not really even facing the audience. And I sang all those songs that I knew. I got through it. And at the end of the evening, I didn't know I had no idea of setting up gear and taking down gear. So I didn't do any of that, but I just stood around and nobody in the audience approached me to say, "Oh, good job, man." Like in the movies. Two of the guys in the band approached me and said, "Hey, would you like to be the singer in this band?" And I remember thinking, there must be something wrong with these people, because I'm not a singer, And I said, "Yeah, okay. What does that mean? What does it mean if I become the singer of this band?" So we've got all these bookings. I said, "All right, I'm free. Most of those nights I've got nothing to do except be at home." So I said, "Okay." And they said, "Well, you have to change your name. You can't be Peter Noone because you're that Peter Noone is that kid who's on Coronation Street." Like I already had so anyway, so I joined the band and I became Pete Novak, and we turned into Pete Novak and the Heartbeats. And, within 2 weeks, my personality, the big shot personality, I started to kind of control the direction of the band. Like the lead singer, who is the youngest person in the band, is suddenly the spokesperson for the band and the leader of the band in people's minds. So me and Alan Wrigley, Alan Wrigley, this guy who'd approached me, we started to get together and we started to plan rehearsals. And so we put our band together and we rehearsed a lot, and we got more and more dates, and we were committed to playing a lot. And one day, it was August the 6th, 1963 by now, and we went across a couple of fields in Urmston, which is kind of on the outskirts of Manchester. It was like only fields existed on one side, and the other side was this town called Manchester. And we walked across one of the fields, and there was a band playing on a 6-inch high stage, and it was the Beatles. And the Beatles were in their second song, and Alan Wrigley leaned over to me. It was pretty loud for for 3 AC-15 amplifiers. He leaned over to me and he said, "Peter, we're fucked." And I didn't think so. I thought, well, that's one way of looking at it. But I think, they probably play often and lots. And I think the more you play, the better you become. And we made a commitment that nobody in the band could have a job. You could have a part-time job, but your real job was professional musician. And we were getting £4 a night, and we figured that if we work 3 nights a week, we'll all be able to make a living. Everybody was into it except for Alan Chadwick, so he left, and we got Keith Hopwood, who looked at how many dates we got, and he had a telephone engineer's job, and he decided that he could, part-time it a little bit. So there we were. We were all in a professional band with, I was at school. Keith Hopwood was a telephone engineer. Carl Green was an engraver, but we all managed to get at least 3 nights a week of gigs. And the other 4 nights we would rehearse. So we were full-time, 7 nights a week band. And of course, because of that kind of commitment, people thought we were better than we were. They really did. They thought, well, they play in this place, in this place, in this place. And ultimately, we got a manager, and he got us a gig at the Cavern. And by having a gig at the Cavern and the Oasis in Manchester, if you could get those 2 dates, you moved into what we called the next shelf. The world of music had shelves. And on the top shelf was Fats Domino and Elvis Presley and all those blokes. And we were down there now on the first shelf, which was, we played the Cavern and the Oasis. And while we were playing the Cavern and the Oasis, we noticed that our van wasn't really as good as the other groups there. And we needed to up the equipment. And we realized that if you bought better equipment, you could move up to the next shelf where people thought you were even better than you really were, because, they must be good. Look at all the equipment they've got. And bit by bit, the shelves included having a road manager and all those things. And we started to move up this shelf, the band shelf thing. Managers started to see that we were playing all these things. People trying to manage us. And we got a manager, and he moved us one more time. We got a manager, and they were really good at getting dates. Little by little, but suddenly by playing these sort of newer ballrooms and not so much youth clubs, but places where people paid money to go in and things, we started to get like a following. And the following was growing enough that people, I like to say, we were the only band in the northwest of England who hadn't got a record deal. And it was probably true. We'd reached this level where only bands that weren't as good as us hadn't got a record deal. So it was our turn to get a record deal, really. So the word was out, like probably Seattle for Nirvana. It was that kind of thing, or CBGBs in the punk movement. We were part of this movement where everybody was getting a record deal. And we noticed that a lot of people were getting record deals and not getting hit records. So we didn't want that kind of record. We didn't want to just put a record out. We want a record that gets on the radio. And our management understood what that meant. It was a guy called Harvey Lisberg and a guy called Charlie Silverman. And we'd keep going. We'd audition for people. And they weren't the right people. But eventually, we got a guy called Mickey Most. We decided, we'd heard a record he'd made by the Animals. And I'd seen him years before, I'd seen him on a touring show, which was, it was the Everly Brothers, Bo Diddley, the Rolling Stones, and Mickey Most. So we knew who he was. I knew that he would be the guy who knew what I wanted because of the songs that he played in the show. And we auditioned for him. He said, you got to fire this band. They're not good enough. I said, well, I can't fire that band. They're my mates. It's all or nothing. And he said, well, okay then, if it's all or nothing, get rid of that bass player, who was the guy who brought me in the band. Get rid of that drummer and get rid of that bass player. And they were the two people who'd started the band and asked me to. But, being an asshole, we fired him because we wanted that record. It was a horrible moment, but it's sort of part of the thing of being in a band. You have to, during that period when a band is driving around in the van, getting £4 a night, you need to figure out which guy has too much to drink, which guy has really bad gas, which guy would prefer to smoke pot than be in a band. You have to weed it out somehow. And that was very stressful on me, weeding out the band, because they were my mates. And we'd created this adventure together. So anyway, it all happens very quickly. So we go back and audition for Mickey. And he said, well, let's record this song. And everybody wants to claim to have found I'm Into Something Good by Carole King. I had a copy. Harvey Lisberg had a copy. Mickey Most had a copy. And he was the producer. Me and the Hermits, the new Hermits, which was Derek Leckenby, Carl Green, Barry Whitwam, and Keith Hopwood, we learned this song called I'm Into Something Good. We went to the studio, recorded it. The managers wrote us a B-side because they knew about publishing. We recorded this song, and Mickey Most didn't think it was a hit record. But he took it home, and his wife, Christine, said, "You're crazy, that's a #1 record. You've got to put it out." So they put it out, like, maybe this, I don't really like it, but let's put it out. Because remember, he'd got the Animals' House of the Rising Sun and all this. Like, this unbelievably brilliant stuff out there on the radio. He put it out, and it came out on a Thursday, and on the Friday it was on the radio. People, the BBC people, who were the only people who played records, they played it in that number. They only had music from 5:30 till 6, top 40 type music from 5:30 till 6 on Fridays in the evening. So they played I'm Into Something Good. And Jimmy Savile, the DJ, said, we knew him. We knew him because he'd booked us 100 times in his venues. All venues were run by ex-wrestlers. And we were part of this scene, the Mecca scene. We played the Liverpool Locarno, the Manchester Plaza. All of those places were in our scene. And he played the Herman's Hermits record, and it was instantly a hit. I mean, it was being played a lot. People liked it, and suddenly our following turned from like 100 people at every gig to like 300 people. People who'd never heard of Herman's Hermits were showing up at gigs, and we were better than we expected to be. We never thought we were any good, but we've suddenly found out we were better because girls could scream and, ooh, what's that? Ooh, we don't know. This is a new level of shelf. Now we're on the shelf with Jerry and the Pacemakers and Billy, people who were much, much better than us, but we were on their shelf. So that quickly grew into this, whatever you call it, Hermania. What happened was we were suddenly thrown into this thing, but we were putting records out that were charting in America. And we wanted to go to America very badly. So Mickey Most and this agent conjured up this American thing. Put out the record in America. The single, I'm Into Something Good, was like number 13 in the charts. And they said, send them on a promotion tour to America. So we did a promotion tour, which was like New York and Dallas. Nobody knows why it was Dallas. But we got, and then we signed on that little promotion tour. Dick Clark signed us to an 84-day tour starting sometime soon. And we were so excited. We were going to get $500 a night for 84 days. And not knowing that didn't include the hotel, the meals, and the transportation and everything. So we arrived and we were put on a bus with 41 people who were different from Herman's Hermits. They had another culture that we knew nothing about. But they were all great people and accepted us. And so we got on this bus, and we were still kids, we were still 16, 17-year-old kids. And we went from town to town in America. And during the tour, we got 3 records in the top 20. So instead of it being Little Anthony Imperials, Bobby V, Freddie Cannon, direct from England, Herman's Hermits, it was suddenly Herman's Hermits with Little Anthony Imperials, all the things. And we went from high school gymnasiums to arenas. In those days, sheds, they were called, 10,000 seaters. And it was a great experience. And what was good about it was that we didn't know anything about America, and we knew not to say anything about America. We knew never to say anything about other people's business. So, I became friends with this guy called Billy Stewart. And the reason I became friends with Billy Stewart was because I was the head of promotion of this tour without knowing that was my role. Every morning at 5 minutes before 6, some local promotion guy would pick me up in a station wagon and we'd do the tour of all the radio stations while everyone else was swimming and having breakfast and ham and eggs at the hotel. I was being driven around in a station wagon, loving every minute of it, but not knowing that was what it would have been nice if somebody else had done it now and then.
But you were the draw.
So anyway, I was the drawer of the tour. So when I got on the bus, I was number 42. And that meant that the only seat available was next to this guy called Billy Stewart, who was a 280, 300-pound guy. But he's a Chess Records guy. So I was like, I remembered that I would have 1/8 of the seat. But I was 16 and 100 pounds, you know what I mean? So it was, let him sit there, Little Anthony wasn't that little. I was little. So I would sit next to Billy Stewart, who was like, I got the greatest education because he'd been a drummer and he'd been Chess Records, and he was a real character. And he was like he'd lived his life and knew nothing about how my life was. So it was like getting married to somebody. You know, we knew nothing about each other. And he would share this story, and I would say, oh, it's nothing like that. And then one day I asked, like, we became friends with Anthony and the Imperials, because they were kids as well. They weren't that much older than us, and we would hang out with them. You know, I think it was Clarence from the Little Anthony Imperials. Clarence or Henry, I don't know. Clarence, I said, Clarence, why do we always stop in Howard Johnson's? See, by this, we knew nothing about America. We didn't know even what to eat, so we always ate what they ate. We had chicken pot pie. We don't know what no such thing as chicken pot pie in England. And ham, eggs over easy. So all Herman's Hermits were, I'll have bacon with eggs over easy. Not even know what eggs over easy meant. How would we know that? There was always somebody cooking behind the thing, and everyone was ordering, why do we always eat in Howard Johnson? And they looked at me like, this is the only place where they let us eat at the counter. We almost fainted. Because we had no idea. We were from England. The only racism that existed in England was if you had enough money, they'd let you in the restaurant. No matter how you were dressed or where you came from, if you were rich, you were in. Well, here in America, it didn't matter what status you weren't allowed to eat at the counter. So, oh boy. So that was a bit of an eye-opener for us. So we ended up spending more time with them than was natural. Because it was kind of an attraction to us, because being in a rock and roll band in England and wearing long hair made you unpopular with truck drivers and rednecks. We spent a lot of time with them, and I became like friends with Billy Stewart, and I was the last person on the bus, and you know, the Hermits had figured out that you could sleep in the luggage rack. Every night the bus would go 600 miles. It's a lot of driving. And
it wasn't a tour bus like today where there's
it was a Greyhound
bunks and
bus.
beds.
Yep.
It was just like
a rented Greyhound. There was no sleeping arrangement. There wasn't even a bathroom on it, you know. One day we're sitting on the bus, and I'm sitting next to Billy Stewart, and a guy called Round Robin, who's also another guy on the bus, fires 3 rounds at Round Robin because they've been having a fight over a girl, Brenda Holloway, who was in fact the best looking girl in America. Anyway, he fired a couple of rounds, and I happened to be sitting next to Billy Stewart, who was this big. And to this day, I wonder, how the hell did he miss? But he popped him in the air, you know, he'd be boom, 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 and they all went in the roof of the bus. So Dick Clark shows off and gets us off the bus. You know, now we're in danger. Gets us off the bus and gets us a station wagon. And now Herman's Hermits are following Bobby V in his station wagon around America. And we have a driver, Randy, the driver from Kentucky, driving with the blisters on his hands from driving in the sunshine. And life changes. But we've got 3 records in the charts, and we're becoming big stars. And we're talking now when you get to the radio station, there's girls waiting outside the radio station, and there's a backstage scene going on. And we've made it. We're now considered in America like and that year, 1965, the label put out 11 singles, and they all get in the top 20. So we're suddenly huge. Now we're signing up for a tour, and we're so big that we want to bring our friends on the tour.
Mm-hmm.
Who's the opening act? Well, can we choose the opening act now? And well, not really. You know, that's not the way it's done. Can we bring the Animals? So we bring the Animals on that tour, and the next tour we bring the Hollies, and the next tour we bring Wayne Fontana and the Mindbenders, and the next tour we bring the Who. And we always wanted to be able to introduce our friends to the American audience. That's what we wanted them to. We wanted to be Jerry and the Pacemakers and punk our friends.
So with all of this, like, obviously it's a very different era of touring. Like, by becoming more famous, you get into a station wagon as opposed to being on a bus with 41 other people. At what point does it progress into more modern touring where you've got a coach for yourselves and you're not just in a station wagon anymore?
Well, we finished that tour in a station wagon, and during that tour, we booked an American 50-day tour in the June or July of that same year. That year in history Herman's Hermits did a 360-day world tour. So we finished that tour. We went back to England, did the tour. Then we went to France, Belgium, Holland, Germany, Switzerland, Italy, Hong Kong, Tel Aviv, in Hawaii, day off. Met Elvis Presley on my day off. Did a concert in Hawaii for KPOI radio station. Then flew to Los Angeles and began a US tour, and that was the tour. For 50 days, we toured with the Animals. And that was also kind of a brand new, even the Animals were in shock, because it was way bigger than we anticipated. And we were selling out everywhere. And we were only getting $10,000 a night. And everybody was making money, but we were still on the level intellectually of the Animals. They're just other gigs. You just got to be as good as you can be. Doesn't matter, how do we show them how good we are around all this stuff? And so when we came back in June, it was like limos. It was different. We got on a plane. I don't think we had our own plane on that tour. We got a Martin. The reason we got a plane was because our agents had figured out we could do 2 dates a day if we had a plane. You could play Birmingham, Alabama in the afternoon and Montgomery, Alabama in the evening. And you could play different dates the same day, different cities on the same day if you had a plane. So we got a Martin 404. So then we changed and we got a little better plane. And then we had a DC-7C. Nice plane, good plane, bigger seats and everything. That's how it went. It went straight from the station wagon. And quite amazingly, the station wagon, we didn't have much luggage. We managed, it was, I don't know how we did it. but it was Randy, me, and Barry Whitwam, the drummer, in the front seat. And the back seat was the 3 other guys. That's it. We went around America like this. I used to fall asleep on each other's shoulders, kind of thing, like YMCA stuff. You know what I mean?
And within a year, you were into your own plane.
We were got on great because we were sharing this thing called success that we'd never dreamed that this would be for us. This was the thing that Roy Orbison had done, and we'd meet all our heroes, and they were all respectful to us. It was like kind of a joyous experience. Like, we never expected anything like this. You meet Chuck Berry and he knew who you were.
That's got to be mind-blowing at that age. Back then, what was communication like back then? Like, how often did you make a call back to your parents in England? Like, now we've got cell phones, we're in constant contact with the people in our lives. But then what was it like on tour?
An interesting thing, and it must be part of that period culture. We didn't communicate. Our parents had let us go out the door when we were 9 or 10, thinking that we were safe. And safe is an interesting concept because you weren't around, but 50,000 moms dropped their 13 and 14-year-old girls off at Shea Stadium at 2:00 and said, we'll pick you up at 7:00. Be hit. Everybody was safe. So our parents imagined we were safe. They didn't think, plane crash, shot. None of that was it. We were all safe. The manager was 22. He'd know how to take care of them. And interestingly enough, quite in the same period, I was considered to be one of the smartest ones around. And I knew nothing. But I was considered, to the point that Kit Lambert, who managed The Who on a tour by 1967, I would have been 20. I was an adult. So I'm 20 and I'm on, and we would bring in The Who on tour. And Kit Lambert asks me, keep your eye on Keith Moon. Make sure he doesn't get into any trouble. And I took responsibility to say, every day, in America, I'm going to take him water skiing. We'd arrive in a town and I'd have the road manager find somebody who had a boat and a water ski, and take me and Keith Moon water skiing. Because that's a healthy thing. You get in the water and in the sunshine and, it's not a bar. And in every picture, Keith Moon has a bottle of booze in his hand. He can slalom in a bottle, or a beer in a can, which is unheard of in those days. There was no canned beer then. Where did he get that from? Every picture we got, like, we were able to ski and hold drinks. So we were showing that off. Look, Mom, slalom. So, key to the period is it was safe.
Yeah.
When you talk about Altamont, that happens at every concert since then.
Uh-huh.
Now a concert is not a safe environment. Somebody could blow it up like they did in Manchester. There's all kinds of... Nowadays, no people are not... Men and women of every age are not safe, but they were then.
Yeah.
Just as long as you didn't mention Vietnam, you were safe in America.
You've been doing the road life for 60 years.
Yeah.
You've gone from the advent of only press has a camera to people have their own personal cameras to now people have a full video studio in a little rectangle in their pocket at this point.
Yeah.
How has that changed the concert experience, both as an artist and for the audience?
Well, what I learned a long time ago, in 1962, isn't good enough to be great. You also have to be an entertainer. And I watched Jerry and the Pacemakers, and I will tell you that he was a true entertainer. And so were all of the Beatles. It's like full-on attention all the time. You could look at them at any point in the show and see that they were into it. There was no head down. There was none of that head down guitar playing with curly hair flopping over. That didn't exist in that period. And I learned in a period where you had to have a show. And because we had to have a show, which we couldn't use in America because girls were screaming, if you had a show, you had to explain and you had to do My Boy Lollipop because that was funny. And you had to be able to talk between the songs, and you had to have other music than every other band played. And of course, as soon as you get a hit record, you have to just play the hit records. And then you get on a tour and you get 15 minutes, and that doesn't give you time to be an entertainer. But I always remembered what it was like at the beginning, and I keep the beginning on stage now. Now I tour with exactly the same lineup as I toured with in 1963. Exactly. 4 musicians and a lead singer with a mic stand. And in those moments on stage, I relive. When I sing I'm Into Something Good, I'm back in the studio. When I'm singing There's a Kind of Hush All Over the World, I can remember singing it to John Paul Jones, who was leading the orchestra. It was a 2-room the musicians' violins were in one room, and the rhythm section was John Paul Jones playing a Fender Precision bass and conducting the orchestra in the other room with his face. It makes me happy to remember those moments. That's what I do, it's really, they taught me that in the drama class, that Stanislavski live in the moment stuff.
Uh-huh.
And I can do that because otherwise I wouldn't be able to sing Mrs. Brown, You've Got a Lovely Daughter. It would be silly, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
A 76-year-old man singing to, how old is this mother now?
And yet you still keep it relevant and live and fresh and vibrant on stage with every song that you put out.
Yeah, because it's what I do. It's my hobby is my career as well. I still buy records. I still listen to other people's records, and they ask me what I think, and I always tell the truth.
What's your favorite record right now?
Well, there's nothing that's in the charts. I'm on my ZZ Top week.
Nice.
In my house, we have Rolling Stones Day, where you only play the Rolling Stones all day. And then we have a Dave Clark 5 Day, which is a really good day. And Searchers, people forgot those. And it sounds like I'm living in the past, but it's only one day of it. And then, the ZZ Top isn't from my childhood. Recently I got a Buddy Holly guitar. The Buddy Holly Educational Foundation gave me a replica of a Buddy Holly guitar. So, of course, for the next day in my car and everything, I'm reliving Buddy Holly. And it takes me back to my bedroom listening to those records and going, how does he do that? Wait a second. A, D, E, hearts that are broken and love that's untrue. So easy and so beautiful that it is like, wow, how did he do this?
Throughout your career, you've done hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of meet and greets. How has that meet and greet aspect of your career changed over the decades? And how has the advent of different technologies changed what that looks like?
I realized once fame peaks and it starts going like that, I remember my sister and I, it was an Everly Brothers concert and the Stones were on it and Bo Diddley was on it. My sister and I accidentally at the stage door met Don and Phil Everly, and they were so kind to us. It was probably because we were kids. They listened to our story. They were kind to us, and I remember, and they peaked. You know, we didn't know that when people came to England, it was because they had some time off. We didn't know that. We didn't know that Roy Orbison and Gene Pitney were not Elvis Presley-esque in America, because they were in England. So when my career peaked, I realized that the most important thing is the following. I remember that when it peaked, that I thought, I'll keep my fans happy, and anybody who comes to a meet and greet or comes for an autograph after the signing they want to tell me their story. I met you at the Steel Pier in 1965. And I don't remember, but I say, oh yeah, you're the one who pushed the horse into the water, right? Some comedy line, and they take that with them, and that's their they need a moment with us. Because I remember that moment with the Don and Phil Everly brother. And luckily for me, I got to tell them 40 years afterwards, I met you once outside the thing and you were so kind to us. And they probably were not being so kind to everybody, but when they were 69 years old, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy the meet and greet thing because somewhere along the way, someone said it. If people bought a ticket to your show, they paid to see you. That's it. And I've been in shows like with the Teen Idols, where I'm the only person who goes out and signs autographs and meets the people. And the other two people have gone off in a limo. I will refuse to get in a limo. I feel like I'm meeting the audience, and a lot of them become my fans. He's much nicer than them. And maybe I don't have any of his records yet. Maybe I should buy one because he's much nicer than those other two clowns.
Mm-hmm.
See what I mean? So it's always been... I think it's part of the deal, I think. And people say, you're giving too much of yourself. I go, I still got some more left.
60 plus years touring, you're very clearly doing something right. I mean, 2023, you had over 100 dates.
Yeah.
You're still in demand. You still have that connection and maintain that connection. And people are excited to see you.
I believe it's all part of the package. I think that the hardest working man in rock and roll, it may be not me right now, but I'd like people to think that I care. There you go. That's it. Because the records are 60 years old. There's a theory, and I'm going to expound on that theory. At the age of 70, this is the demographic age. At the age of 70, the list of reasons not to go out, hundreds of lists on that list. And there's only 2 lists to go out, Rolling Stones and Paul McCartney. So if you can stay in the game and have 70-year-old people and 60-year-old people come out and pay money to see you, that's pretty inspirational to me.
Yeah.
And of course, they're not the only ones there, but if they don't show up, I'm screwed.
And at this point, they're bringing their kids, they're bringing their grandkids, and they're introducing them to your music for the first time, and you're now making new fans all of a sudden, and they're getting that connection with you after the show because you're doing that same genuine meet and greet. You have been so generous with your time with me, and I appreciate that so much. I've got one last question for you. If you could go back to the first time you were playing the Cavern and give yourself one piece of advice to live by, what would it be, knowing everything that you know now?
There's thousands. I learned everything I know at the Cavern, and it's to always watch any act that's on stage before you, and most of the time you will learn things not to do. I've watched every act that I've ever been on a bill with. I've watched them from the side of the stage. I get dressed an hour before the show so that I can be on the side of the stage and watch The Who. And over the years, when you see pictures of people that I'm on a bill with, you can actually see me standing on the left-hand corner of the stage watching the drummer and watching the da-na-na-na. And that's what I learned. Always watch out what's going on and what the audience are doing, because... I know what I learned. Important. I am the audience. If I was watching Herman's Hermits, I would know what to expect.
Yeah.
And I learned a lot from people who didn't know who they were and who the audience were.
Well, thank you again. Thank you so much for being here with me today. Thank you for being so generous with your time. It has been an absolute pleasure.
Me too. I love talking about me.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Take care of yourself.
Josh, what a special interview with Peter Noone. I have to admit, I know it was my father's generation that grew up on his music, but back when I was a young lad, we didn't have internet. We listened to the radio a lot, and we listened to something called the Oldie Station. Now, back then, they weren't playing 90s music on the Oldie Station, which I really resent that that's a thing today. But the Oldie Station was on all the time. So in a way, Peter Noone's music was really my generation too, because we listened to it all the time. And I'm so familiar with all of his music. It brings me back anytime I listen to any of their songs. So there's just like this nostalgia. So I just really enjoyed hearing the stories. I admit didn't know that much about him personally or his story. So I just loved hearing all of the stories that he told, and what a great storyteller too.
Absolutely. And I am really impressed to know that they based My Fair Lady off of him. But in all honesty, I thought it was really interesting to, sort of hear about that classist structure just based on the way that one person talks. And obviously not just an English thing, but also just something that happens in the world throughout. Differently, I was sort of surprised because I grew up listening to Herman's Hermits because of my parents, but for whatever reason, it never clicked to me that they were touring at the same time as all the other bands that he listed, which was sort of like a mind-blowing moment for me, just thinking about some of those bills that he has been on, and like those concerts that you could have seen with all those impressive bands.
I pictured it like showcasing the way they would do concerts with all these groups. And I don't know if you've ever seen the movie, the Tom Hanks movie, That Thing You Do.
Yes.
But that's how I pictured that as he's talking. They'd go on, you'd basically do a showcase and then run right off, and it was turned over to the next group and the next group. And so, I mean, it's just such a different landscape or world, unless you're going to arts conferences like us. I don't know that the general person can, out in the public could experience that today.
Yeah, it's a shame they don't have festivals or something like that where they've got hundreds of bands.
They have festivals, but they don't play their hit song and then run off. They play a set at festivals. They play full sets. So it's still very different.
Man, can you imagine booking something like that where it's just like, we want you to come in, play one or two of your hit songs, and then go? Imagine how much that would cost today. Just putting that together.
Imagine how much the backline would cost for that. Like, imagine the size of the stage you would have to put all that backline on, so that it didn't take, the whole entire show wasn't just watching the crew move stuff around.
Yeah, special props to the crews.
Well, and I think actually what we're talking about right now, and sort of related to Peter's story about how he, had to take these elocution classes and, move through and sort of like the classist elements there. And then the story he told later about not really being aware of like kind of the socio-political climate in the United States when they came across the pond, right, and started touring, and that story that he told about sort of learning about that. I think it just goes to show how much, one, the world has changed in terms of, Josh made the point about communication and that sort of thing, but just how little we know about our counterparts around the world and sort of like the cultures and the issues that they face, how different the world is from the late 50s and the 1960s to today. And there really have been massive shifts in so many different ways. He told about his bandmates and getting to know other groups and sort of having that experience of like, oh, this is really different from where we come from, and but also embracing the people that they were with and creating those friendships. But also I really liked hearing how open-minded they were and how much they embraced sort of these relationships with other bands.
Yeah. And he said at one point too, safety is an interesting concept, which is definitely a way to say that it's gotten harder to stay safe, both as an artist as well as an audience member. He's talking about driving around in a station wagon. There's a level of artists certainly that can do that today, but people that are doing arenas and even have a moderate amount of fame, you can't do that. Even going into a concert, you can't just get like dropped off in front of the venue anymore. The amount of money and time and effort that safety has really kind of become a much larger part of our industry and is still becoming a larger part. I think that we do miss talking about that side of the front of house experience and the general facility experience, especially when we're talking in these conversations about art and artists.
Interesting part of their kind of evolution story and their growth story, I thought, was when they were working with Mickey Most to produce their first album. And it was actually Mickey's wife that said, no, that's a hit. And first of all, it was a Carole King song. Just want to make a note. That's a Carole King song. And second of all, it was his wife that said, no, you have a hit on your hands. So I think, first of all, just the role of women in the industry at that point in time was pretty limited. And second of all, sometimes it takes an outside perspective to go, no, you have something here, or no, you need to work on that and improve that. So I thought that was really interesting, and it really kind of stuck in the back of my brain that it was an outside perspective that helped them get their first #1 hit.
Going back to the pay real quick, when they were on that tour, he mentioned getting 4 English pounds in the early 1960s. And I just did the calculations, which would be about $11 in US money in 1960. And in today's money, depending on how you do the calculation, that'd be between $102 and $110 per gig.
Wow. And they were saying that, like, if they got 4 gigs a week at £4, they can make a living off of that. Like, that's a wild concept. And just in terms of, like, again, how our world has changed so much and the cost of things and what it takes to just eke out a somewhat decent living as a professional, I think, across the board. Yeah. That's wild.
So something that I think is important that he really talked about for anybody who's an artist, who's performing for an audience, is that you always have to be an entertainer. And that means different things, you know, based on what your art form is. But I kind of felt like that early training of being in the theater school and doing the soap operas, kind of, you can see those trickle effects in the way that he approaches still creating art to this day. Talking about like watching the act that's on the stage before you so that you get a sense of like what the audience is feeling that night. And you learn what not to do. It kind of really emphasizes like his ability to like refocus or be a little bit flexible on like maybe stories he wants to tell, or like how fast he's going to get into the first song, and all those like little things that, especially once you are professional and you're doing this over and over and over again, you kind of know yourself and your band that you have kind of the flexibility to do. And, you know, like those are kind of the things that people don't see, right? They just see, oh, someone comes on and they're just they're so great with people, or, you know, they really are great at doing this. And those are the things that like really make that person seem so effortless and flawless when they're in front of the audience.
You're right, Danielle. The homework within a single show for him to get the read of the audience, I think, is a really important point, that he's trying to feel out the audience before he even gets on stage. And like he said, watching other people screw it up lets him know exactly how he should handle the audience.
I just want to make a note that my favorite moment of this interview was when he nonchalantly dropped that on his day off during the world tour, he met Elvis Presley. Like, just threw that in there. Not a big deal. He just met Elvis in Hawaii on his day off.
You think about the Beatles at the time, and that he was literally playing the same clubs that they were playing at the time and wandered into a field where they were playing, and just the amount of greatness that was around them at the time. And with the British invasion, like him thinking about the timing of it and going, well, we're next. You know, we've been watching the rest of the bands, and shelf-wise, we're next. It's our time.
I was also taken by when he told the story of having to fire their drummer. And like, obviously that was something they had to do for professional advancement, but putting myself in that situation, I don't know that I'd be able to do that, especially somebody that you came up with and you're playing all these gigs with and starting to get some success, and then to say, all right, to get to the next stage of success, we have to get rid of you. That would have been a really tough decision. Speaking of which, when we're done recording, Kevin, remind me to talk to you if you could stay behind a little bit.
I actually completely understand.
You totally beat me to that. Well, thank you all for sitting down today to discuss this. I can't believe it's been 100 episodes.
I can't believe you all have sat down and talked to each other, or we've all sat down and talked to each other at least 100 times.
It's pretty amazing. It definitely is.
I can't believe we still like each other. I mean,
Yeah.
I've got some thoughts on that.
Brian.
Josh, remind me to add you to that meeting after this recording.
This has been a lot of fun on our end. Thank y'all for joining us again for our 100th episode. Still can't believe that we're here, still having fun together.
100.
There's No Business Like podcast team is so thankful for your support for all 100 episodes that we've had and all the ones yet to come. We still have tons of amazing stories coming at you soon in the upcoming weeks. We look forward to seeing you again soon.
All right, everyone. Thanks for listening to There's No Business Like. Our producers and hosts are Brian Zelmer, Josh Benson, Kevin Maynard, Katie Miller, and me, Danielle Vanhoe. Views expressed in this podcast are ours alone and are not reflective of the organizations we are a part of. Keep up with us at nobusinesslike.com. There you'll find links to all of our episodes and socials. If you like this podcast, give us a like, a follow, a review, or our favorite, a 5-star rating. Oh wait, what was that site? I got it, don't worry. It is nobusinesslike.com. Do I sound out bus-I-ness every time I type it? Yep, sure do. Stay in touch, my friends.
I have to pee. I can't wait.
Not gonna do a question?
That
That
was
was the question.
Oh yeah, I guess it was.
I have to pee again. Oh, gee willikers, folks. Thanks for putting up with our antics.
That sounded so sincere.